Remove this food from your home now. It could increase your diabetes risk in 30 days. That sentence is meant to get your attention. I want you to hear the urgency in it, and then I want you to hear the important qualifiers immediately after. The evidence I'll describe is observational, not proof of immediate causation. And the 30 days I keep using is a practical behavioral target, because some metabolic and inflammatory markers can shift in a matter of weeks for certain people. Chronic disease develops over years, but small sustained changes in what we eat and what we keep on the pantry shelf can meaningfully reduce exposures that, on a population level, are linked to higher risks of type 2 diabetes and some cancers. If this matters to you, please like and share with someone who packs lunch meat for their kids. Let me summarize the strongest evidence up front. Large cohort studies, including the French Nutrinet Santé cohort and analyses published in journals such as the BMJ and Nature Communications, have found that higher intakes of foods containing certain preservatives are associated with higher relative risks of type 2 diabetes and with increased risks for several types of cancer in some analyses. One headline figure you may see reported from parts of this literature is about a 47% higher relative risk for type 2 diabetes in certain comparisons. That sounds dramatic, so it needs immediate context. Relative risk compares rates between two groups. If the baseline absolute risk is small, a large relative increase still translates to a modest change in absolute terms. For example, if a particular baseline risk for a group over a given time is 2 cases per 1,000 people, a 47% relative increase would raise that to about 2.94 cases per 1,000, less than 1 extra case per 1,000 people. That does not mean the preservative causes diabetes in any one person within 30 days. Rather, at a population level, there is an association that suggests taking reasonable steps to reduce exposure is a sensible, low-risk precaution. So what are we actually talking about in terms of ingredients? 3 preservative groups come up repeatedly in the literature and in food label analyses. First, sodium nitrite and sodium nitrate, listed as E250 and E251. These are commonly used in cured and processed meats, bacon, ham, hot dogs, many lunch meats. They have a well-described chemistry. Under certain conditions in the stomach, they can be converted into nitrosamines, compounds that have been linked historically to increased cancer risk, particularly colorectal cancer. There's also plausible mechanistic reason to be cautious about nitrite, nitrate, and metabolic health. Nitrosamine formation and related processes can contribute to inflammation and tissue stress that, over time, may worsen insulin sensitivity. The second group includes potassium sorbate and acetate salts, listed as E202, E260, and E262. These are used widely in flavored yogurts, shelf-stable dips and sauces, some processed cheeses, and beverages to lengthen shelf life or prevent molds. Some experimental work and observational signals suggest these compounds can promote oxidative stress and low-grade inflammation in the gut and systemically, again creating a milieu that can favor metabolic dysfunction. The third is calcium propionate, E282, used frequently in packaged sliced breads and many commercial baked goods to prevent mold. There is growing concern about its effects on the gut microbiome, the community of microbes in our intestines, and how shifts in that garden of microbes may alter metabolic regulation, energy extraction, and inflammation in ways that can increase insulin resistance. When I talk about mechanism, I like to use simple images. Think of your gut microbiome as a garden. Healthy soils and diverse plants, microbes, help maintain balance, keep pests out, and regulate water and nutrients. If you start pouring in something that favors weeds over the good plants, the garden becomes less resilient. That loss of resilience can lead to low-grade inflammation, changes in how your body processes sugar, and a higher chance of metabolic disruption. Another image. Oxidative stress is like rust on an engine. Rust doesn't always stop the car immediately, but over time it degrades performance. Inflammation and oxidative damage can gradually impair how insulin signals cells to take up glucose. Those mechanistic ideas, nitrosamine chemistry, microbiome disruption, chronic inflammation and oxidative stress, and downstream insulin resistance, are plausible ways in which certain additives might be linked to higher diabetes risk in observational studies. Plausible does not equal proven. What it does mean is that reducing unnecessary exposure to these substances is a low-risk, practical move while the science continues to evolve. So what do these preservatives look like in real life? Here's a quick, plain language walkthrough. Sodium nitrite, jock nitrate, E250, E251, appear in cured and processed meats. If your weekly grocery list regularly includes bacon, sliced ham, some deli turkey, packaged hot dogs, or many sandwich meats, there's a good chance nitrites are present. Calcium propionate, E282, is often in pre-sliced loaves, packaged sandwich bread, and many factory-made baked goods, where mold prevention is important for shelf life. Potassium sorbate and acetate salts, E202, E260, E262, appear in many flavored yogurts, shelf-stable dips, processed cheese spreads, and some snack products marketed to kids. A key skill here is label literacy. On an ingredient list, you might see the chemical name, sodium nitrite, or the E code, E250, especially on products sold in or imported from Europe. In the United States, E codes are less commonly used on labels, but manufacturers will list the chemical name, sometimes buried toward the end of the ingredient list. When you're shopping, take 30 seconds to glance at the back of a package. If you see sodium nitrite or sodium nitrate, calcium propionate, potassium sorbate, or acetate salts, note the product and consider alternatives. I know what you're thinking. Swapping everything out sounds expensive and time-consuming. That's why I want to give you a realistic, stepwise 5-step kitchen cleanup plan tied to a 30-day timeline. The goal is not perfection. It's a concrete, achievable change that reduces exposure and helps you build new habits. Treat 30 days as a trial period. Enough time for some metabolic markers to shift for some people, and enough time for a new habit to start to stick. Week 1. Start with the bread. Packaged sliced breads are one of the most common sources of calcium propionate, E282. Swap to a loaf from a local bakery that uses a simpler ingredient list. Choose an artisanal sourdough, or buy frozen whole grain loaves without calcium propionate and keep them in the freezer. Time-saving tip: slice and freeze portions so you can pull individual slices as needed. If a bakery loaf is outside the budget, learn a no-knead or simple one-bowl bread recipe. Homemade loaves can be made on a weekend and stored for the week. Even switching 2 or 3 days a week away from packaged sandwich bread reduces exposure substantially. Week 2. Reconsider deli meats and processed lunch meats. These are one of the major sources of sodium nitrite, E250, E251. Instead of pre-packaged sliced lunch meat, try roasted whole chicken or turkey you portion and slice at home. Many grocery deli counters will roast a turkey breast or whole chicken with minimal added preservatives if you ask. Canned tuna or salmon, or even hard-boiled eggs, make convenient protein options for sandwiches or salads. Time-saving tip: roast a whole chicken on Sunday, shred it, and freeze portions so you can make quick sandwiches or meal bowls during the week. If you do buy deli meat, seek out brands that advertise uncured or no added nitrates, nitrites. But read labels carefully, because some of those products still use celery powder or other natural sources of nitrates that can act similarly. Week 3. Swap flavored and shelf-stable dairy. Many flavored yogurts and shelf-stable dairy desserts rely on potassium sorbate and acetate salts, E202, E260, E262, to stay fresh. Move toward plain yogurt or kefir and add your own fruit, a drizzle of honey, or a handful of nuts. Choose fresh cheeses with short ingredient lists. Time-saving tip: make single-serving jars with plain yogurt, fruit, and a topping the night before, so breakfast or snacks are grab and go. Week 4. Audit snacks and bars. Snack bars, packaged baked goods, and many health-marketed bars often hide propionates or sorbates to preserve shelf life. Swap toward whole food snacks. Mixed nuts, plain popcorn you flavor at home, fruit, or simple homemade trail mix made with oats, dried fruit, and seeds. Time-saving tip: make a big batch of trail mix one afternoon and portion it into snack bags for the week. Another option is to keep a stash of frozen berries and plain yogurt for smoothies that are fast and additive-free. Ongoing, build label literacy and batch cooking habit. Spend a few minutes each week scanning the labels of your regulars. Make one audit trip through your pantry and fridge. If an item contains E250, E251, E282, E202, E260, E262, decide whether to replace it, minimize use, or accept it in rotation. For protein efficiency, roast large quantities and freeze in meal-sized portions. For bread and baked goods, freezing and slicing helps reduce both waste and the temptation to buy convenience replacements. Throughout this 30-day plan, start small and prioritize one staple to replace. Pick the single product you use most frequently and commit to swapping it for 30 days. That could be the packaged sandwich bread, the lunch meat, the flavored yogurt, or your go-to snack bar. The logic is simple. Small, sustained reductions in exposure are more likely to be adopted long-term than sweeping, short-lived overhauls. Let's address cost, taste, and practicality. Yes, some additive-free options can be slightly more expensive, but there are pragmatic ways to manage budget impact. Freeze portions to reduce waste. Reallocate a small portion of your grocery budget. For example, substituting one takeout meal per week for a slightly higher quality loaf of bread. And you often come out ahead. Cooking in batches saves time and money. A whole roasted chicken feeds multiple meals, and homemade trail mix costs less than premium bars. Taste-wise, many people report preferring the fuller texture of real bread and the richer tang of plain yogurt with fresh fruit once they get used to the change. This isn't about perfection. It's about prioritizing fewer processed preservatives in your household. Now, a crucial point about interpreting risk. Population-level studies measure associations. A 47% increased relative risk sounds alarming, but absolute risk often remains small. Using the simple example from earlier, if the baseline is 2 cases per 1,000, a 47% increase raises that to approximately 2.94 per 1,000, less than 1 extra case per 1,000 people. That's why public health researchers emphasize population strategies. Small shifts across millions of people can prevent many cases overall. For an individual, focusing on modifiable, low-risk exposures, like the preservative-containing foods we've discussed, makes sense as part of a broader approach that includes maintaining a healthy weight, staying active, and following medical screening guidelines. None of this should be read as a promise that swapping your bread or snacks will prevent disease single-handedly, but it is a practical, evidence-aligned step you can take. You might wonder, how quickly do measurable changes happen? Some studies and metabolic experiments show that markers like inflammation, insulin sensitivity, and certain metabolic blood markers can shift within weeks when diet changes are made. For some people, those changes are detectable within 30 days. That's why the 30-day target is useful. It's long enough to see early biological responses for some, and short enough to make a trial feel doable. If after 30 days you notice practical wins, fewer cravings, better energy, or simply the confidence that you can read labels and make informed choices, that's progress. If you don't notice immediate changes, remember that chronic disease risk accumulates over time, and the benefits of sustained, modest exposure reduction can compound. A responsible word about uncertainty. Observational data can be confounded by other lifestyle factors. People who consume more packaged, preservative-containing foods may also differ in activity levels, overall diet quality, socioeconomic factors, and other exposures that contribute to risk. The cohorts strive to adjust for these variables, but residual confounding, variables that weren't measured or fully accounted for, can remain. That's why scientists describe these results as associations and call for careful interpretation and further research. Nevertheless, the biological plausibility and consistency across multiple lines of evidence warrant sensible caution. What about special populations? Children, pregnant people, those with existing metabolic disease? The advice I'm offering is about reducing unnecessary exposures broadly. Parents who pack lunches for kids can make high-impact swaps. Freshly roasted turkey, homemade nut butter sandwiches on simpler bread, plain yogurt with fruit, and whole fruit snacks. Small changes in a child's diet can improve overall quality without strict elimination. If you have a diagnosed medical condition, are pregnant, breastfeeding, or take medications, check with your healthcare provider before making significant dietary changes. That's standard, responsible advice. Let me close by offering a simple, pragmatic challenge you can do right now. Open your fridge or pantry. Find one staple that likely contains one of the culprits I mentioned: E250, E251, E282, or E202, E260, E262. Commit to swapping that single item for the next 30 days. Make a concrete plan. If it's bread, buy a different loaf or freeze slices. If it's deli meat, roast a chicken and portion it. If it's flavored yogurt, buy plain and add fruit. Small wins build momentum. If you want a step-by-step visual guide, watch the linked kitchen audit video I've put together. It walks through labels, shows quick batch cooking tips, and lists simple recipes you can use to minimize time in the kitchen. This is educational, not individualized medical advice. Talk to your healthcare provider about your personal risk and before making major dietary changes, especially if you have existing health conditions or are taking medication. Today's takeaway in one sentence: You can reduce a plausible population-level risk factor for metabolic disease by making small, sustainable swaps. Start with one staple for 30 days, reassess, and build from there. If this message was useful, check out the kitchen audit video linked in the description for a practical walkthrough, and subscribe if you want more evidence-based, pragmatic strategies for healthier eating at home. Take one small step this week. Read a label, make one swap, and give your body the chance to show you the difference.